Shabbat Shalom, Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazizu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you. Welcome back. This is Judges chapter 18. There are 31 verses. In verse 2, it says, Men of valor, describing the sons of Dan. The 5 men they sent were men of valor versus men from their coasts. So these are exceptional men that they sent. Men of valor, men of bravery. In verse 3 it says, Doeth thou? What are you doing here versus what are you making here? Verse 4, I became his priest versus I am. Sorry, priest. Pronounce every word correctly. Verse 7, securely. So these people are dwelling securely in Laish or Laish versus they are dwelling carelessly, without a care in the world. And it says that they are at ease versus quiet and secure. So there is no one perverting or shaming a matter in the land, no heir extorting treasures versus there was no magistrate, which is like a governor in the land, someone who judges small matters and large matters, that might put them to shame in anything. And it says here, intercourse, which means business, which means dealings, communications. Verse 8, significant difference. It says, Why sit you here idle? So these 5 men are asking them, Why are you sitting here? Why are you just sitting here? Versus what you or what say you. So that's a significant difference as to what are you saying. And then they said to them, just further encouraging them to do something, not just sit there in their butts. It says, delay not to go versus be not slothful to go. So don't delay any further versus stop being lazy. In verse 14, they describe in this place versus in these houses. So there's a specific place, not multiple houses, where there is like a temple, an ephod, a teraphim, and so on, in this one house. Verse 15, another significant difference here. It says, they asked him how he was. They asked him, Micah, how are you? Inquiring of his welfare versus saluting him, which is a polite recognition of his presence. So that's a significant difference there. In verse 22. So this is a continuous difference throughout the Septuagint and the Masoretic. It's not exclusive. This difference is not exclusive to this book. And I'm going to look into this and talk about it right now. It's the words cried out. So crying out, like versus gathering together. And we noticed this as well in, I believe it's a story of Isaac and Rebekah. It says that Rebekah cried out or lighted off her donkey, depending on which translation. I believe it's crying out in the Septuagint and then lighted off in the Masoretic. So we'll look into that a little bit later in this video. So what is the matter in verse 23? What is the matter with you that thou hast cried out? Versus what ails you? What aileth thee that thou comest with such a company? So what is bothering you? I should say not really bothering you. What are you sick with? Versus what is the matter with you that you cried out, or as we'll see later, gathered together. 24, there's another significant difference in this chapter. It says, my graven image versus my Elohim. So we can see he's not saying this is my Elohim, this is my graven image. He sees it in the right perspective, that it's simply an image, not his actual Elohim. My priest versus the priest. So he takes ownership of this priest, and it's personal. You've taken my priest versus the priest. And then why criest thou versus what aileth thee? Continual difference. Verse 25, this verse seems to show us that the Masoretic might actually be more correct in the rendering of whether it's gather together or crying out, because it says here, the children of Dan said unto him, or said to him, let not thy voice be heard with us. So if he cried out, if they all cried out, this would have been, this is not applicable anymore. This would not apply in the circumstances if they already cried out, right? Just common sense. So if they cried out, yeah, they would have been heard. So the Hebrew word for cry out, has multiple connotations, one of which means to be called, to assemble, or gather, okay? Let me just pause here and give you the actual word. Okay, so this is the word. It's sak. 6817. No, not socks that you wear. It's actually pronounced sawak. Okay, sawak, to cry out, to call. If you keep scrolling down, you'll see there is an alternative meaning, connotation. Call together, cry out, gather selves together. So if we reverse engineer the Greek of cry out back into the Hebrew, it can also mean gather together. So there's no problem there. It's just a little confusing if you are gung-ho on sticking to one translation and not really looking into the different possibilities of the original Hebrew, okay? So again, has multiple connotations, sawak, one of which means to be called, to assemble, or gather together. In verse 30, talks about Jonathan, or Yonatan, was the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and he was appointed, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan. Okay, so was he permitted to be priest in the first place? Well, I would say no, he's not a Levite. He is of Manasseh, the tribe of Manasseh. It's supposed to be the Levites are the ones who have exclusive rights to be high priest, or to be priest specifically, and Aaron's sons more specifically. Okay, and then we see an omission in this verse of for themselves. Where's that? I think it's in verse 31. Oh no, it's right in 30. So the graven image for themselves. So they set it up. They set up the graven image for themselves. Repeats again in 31 as well. And before I get to 31, it says that they were priests to the tribe of Dan till the time of the carrying away of the nation. So they were taken away into captivity, the people, the nation itself. The Masoretic is a little confusing because it's talking about the captivity of the land. So the land is being subdued, not the people. The people are not being carried away. The land has been captive. So it could be like in the day of Yeshua, HaMashiach, you had Jerusalem and Israel being occupied by the Romans. So were they simply occupied? No. The Septuagint makes it very clear that the nation itself was carried away into captivity, most likely. And then in verse 31, it says again, for themselves was omitted, which implies that they set up the graven image, not just setting it up, but it was set up for themselves for the purpose of worship, to worship this graven image, whatever it was. And then lastly, there's an omission of a little detail, just reiterating that this is the period of the judges, and that being so, in those days there was no king in Israel. So that's all for this video and this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, we'll look at Judges chapter 19. Shabbat Shalom. Shalom Aleichem. Assalamu Alaikum. Rini Mazisu. Pax Vobiscum, and peace be unto you. Maranatha.